Cervantes is here. After life created everything else, it made man. And as soon as the first one became conscious, with a wide sweep of its arms, life showed him the rest of what it had done, and with a satisfied smile asked, "Huh?" The man stopped what he was doing, took a long look around at everything else, then spoke his very first words. "I'll have to think about it." And from that day on, things have been going, things have been going about how you probably see them going. The would-be mystic begins the journey certain of a difference between the everyday world and the state of enlightenment. This seems so obvious and self-evident that to question it would be foolish. But trust me, don't be so sure. All descriptions fall. All descriptions come needed. They are born, they grow, they flourish for a while, then fall, only to be replaced by yet new ones. Through man flows a magical river, but to fulfill the duties life has given him, he must continually dam and divert it. A father told a son, even if you don't like a particular person, you can, just keep quiet about it. And the boy asked, but what if that person involved is yourself? And no man replied, in that case, you can do even better. Life and enlightenment are ultimately the same, and to seek for the latter outside of the former is of eventual folly. The part cannot possess the whole, much less surpass it. Another name for that better state of consciousness, seamless. If, at any given moment, you'd mentally prefer to be somewhere other than where you are, you haven't got much of a mystic's chance. If you try to say what's wrong with man, you help there be something wrong with man. The difference is the prophets tell only the story of their own adventure, while the priests and preachers who follow merely rehash the prophet's story. In saving scrap paper, a man said to himself, so that trees did not die in vain. Remove from written description and apply liberally to one's thoughts. A father so told a son, there are few things about which you can safely feel that they are absolutely correct or not, and here is one of them. You are totally in error anytime you think that the moment can be any time other than now. Consciousness freed from comment lies in the world of seamless thought, and seamless thought in the realm of consciousness without comment. A man once asked a mystic, why are those who seek the enlightenment always described as being explorers, warriors, adventurers, and knights, rather than in terms of more common everyday pursuits, such as referring to them as farmers, shoemakers, smithies, and such? And the wise one replied, but even using the more exotic sounding words, 'tis still nearly impossible for the mundane ear to catch the drift, so imagine the futility of attempting otherwise. And can you begin to sense the distinction between the everyday man and the mystic? One seems common, the other exotic. One seems prosaic and the other exciting and mysterious. And yet they both inhabit the same land, breathe the same air, eat the same food, are exposed to the same experiences, have access to the same thoughts, live the same days, then die. Where is the distinction? What keeps an ordinary man from being a mystic, or even suspecting that he has the potential? Eventually, at its core, this sort of activity is a revolution, for its intention is to knock down and turn over everything presently in you. You can't know of man's unique state of awareness until you have a mind to think about it, and by then the matter is already cloudy. Let's hear it out there for justice, balance, beauty, and art, for kids and cotton candy and carousels, and for all the good times to be had at the carnival. A dying mystic called his 10 closest followers to his bed and asked, "When I'm gone, will you keep my name alive?" And all but one cried, "Yes." And he was able to pass on 10% satisfied. From one bouncy view, the only difference between being asleep and being awake is that in one state, you're aware of it. One day, a warrior was visiting a certain quite ordinary city and suddenly realized a certain extraordinary truth. Just as all parades are one seamless, endless entity, so too is the life energy flowing through me from my feet up to my head. And it is only at the latter stage that I began to forget this. How strange, how beautifully, curiously strange. The mind of a mystic is neither fish nor water, but gills. Enlightened consciousness is not thought, but experience. Those more alive yet receive directions from the dead. Do not today's generation carry the genes of their fathers, their forefathers, even the race itself? Tip: to stay simple of mind and at street level, stay in a hurry. To comment on life requires that a knight loosen his attention, halt his journey, and dismount from the steed that has brought him this far. Tip: being mindful and deliberate interferes with pride and personal self-esteem. Within one lifetime, there is no going back, nor any going ahead. There is only right now. The story of human consciousness and all of its potentials. Philosophies espoused are philosophies not lived. A father once so advised his son, "Let pain stay in the body, and sorrow in the heart, and keep them both out of the mind, unless you know how to make use of them there." A man once said to a mystic, "I have listened to you for some time, but I must tell you that I do not understand what you're talking about." And the mystic replied, "Neither do I. And the only difference between us is that I can accept it." Language is language, nothing more and nothing less. Language is language, nothing more, but always something less. Always something just a little different. A warrior once noted, "Outside of things, where do things exist? They exist in words and thoughts, and yet they also continue to exist in themselves." This is part of the great secret again revealed. Men do not normally live their lives, but rather their biography. What is publicly worshipped are statues. What the few do privately is the spirit behind the stone. A man once sought out a certain mystic to ask him, "Is there anything in the everyday world to be taken seriously serious?" And the mystic replied, "No." But as he turned to leave, added, except if it applies to you a loss of intellectual integrity and personal sense of honor. Momentarily after the awakened one's departure, the man shook himself from his reflection and chased after him, asking further, "Well, is there any protection against this other than calculated silence?" And the mystic replied, "Well, even if there is, none other is necessary, now is it?" A knight once asked the warrior king, "How can one be more conscious until one is conscious?" And the liege replied, only he who is knows the answer to this." Sometime later, after a particularly good battle on a particularly inclement day, the leader sought out the knight again and picked back up their conversation. Once there, being conscious is being more conscious. And suddenly, it became clear. Questions asked in a deluded state go nowhere, since they are part of the delusion. One warrior, after he realized how things worked, began to think of every interruption in the flow of his consciousness as his own personal version of the little death. One day, one guy stopped and thought, "You know, if you stop and think about it, nothing makes sense." The ultimate in gracefulness is internal, in the seamless flow of uninterrupted consciousness. Many people, should they ever be able to hear and understand this, would cry out in a kind of misdirected rejection, "No! Protect us from the pain of its pleasurable simplicity." Thought without seams is thought without dreams. Thought without seams is the consciousness. And yet, one more view of it. To be mystically awakened is to begin silently counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and never stop. Never. And a man asked a mystic, "What is the problem, the major drawback to being more conscious?" And the mystic replied, "Nothing." The story, the man who asked a mystic why this sort of activity, or why the so-called awakening, enlightenment, illumination, why it is referred to not only in those terms which sound, when you first hear them, to be out of the ordinary, but then when you hear the descriptions. In the story, of course, I'm making self-reference to my own descriptions, but he asked the mystic, why does those who seek it are referred to as adventurers and warriors and knights, and instead of something more prosaic. And he points out to him that even while using the more exotic terms, that it's still almost impossible for the ordinary ear to catch the drift of what's going on anyway. In other words, he was saying, well, he's answering why does there seem to be extraordinary, strange, exotic, mysterious terminology used about this? And the mystic replied that if you did not, that you'd be in worse shape, insofar as people hearing it, because even using out of the ordinary, unexpected terms, people can hardly hear it. But then there was a combination, I'm not going to go back and read them all, of other news items and stories, and even part of this one was presented a rhetorical question about what is the difference between an ordinary man, between a instead of calling it a mystical explorer. What's the difference between a mystical explorer and a curious blacksmith? What is the difference, to cut out the adjectives and the referrals to even allegorical professions? What's the difference between an ordinary man and a mystic? I gave you at least two versions tonight that you could hear, and a third one was slipped in under the door. That the only difference between being awake and being asleep, to use that term for one of the items, is that in one of the states you're aware of it. What could be more prosaic than that? What could be less mystifying than that? There is a magical river. All right, we'll try the other one. The subtle one. There is a magical river flowing through man, but to fulfill his duties, to fulfill the duties that life has put upon him, he must continually dam and divert it. So at least anyone think I was talking about something even stranger than is necessary, this human consciousness. There's an energy, if you've never thought about it, that was also thrown in indirectly tonight. I'm not going into it, and I do not mean it in any particularly allegorical or mystical sense, but the energy that runs all creatures on any planet. In one sense, using the 3D context, the energy runs from the earth itself into your feet, in the feet of hippos, trees, but it runs into your feet, and it goes through the nervous system, and it culminates in the head. When this energy quits, you're dead. You are the hippo. It runs up everyone's nervous system, including our friends, the water pigs. It runs up as high as it can go, and that's what makes a hippo a hippo. That's what makes a cougar, and man, besides the physical distinction. The energy coming through the planet from other directions, other places, at any rate, the earth is alive, life is alive, but the earth is alive, and the energy, I do pretty good not to get hung up on it, right? Just listen. It runs through your feet. That's where you're plugged in to life at this level. And it goes up everyone's nervous system, and assuming you're just an ordinary, sane, common person, it gets up high enough in the brain that you have a workable IQ, you're reasonably intelligent, you are simply an ordinary, sane, civilized person. The flow is continually interrupted. And the only importance to all of this, I'm suggesting tonight, is this is what makes man in a state of consciousness less than is at any given moment potentially or potential. It is not that man, like the old stories that all would-be mystical systems, all the public prophets, all the retelling of everyone's story always has it, that there has to be something wrong with man. I don't even have to apologize for continuing to point this out to you because your own nervous system is subject to it and you forget it. But it is almost impossible to hear anything and believe that it's of importance unless it is prefaced, or at least running parallel, with a condemnation of man, or some aspect of man. The common one being, well, you people are just certainly not good Christians because you do not live by the tenets of the Episcopal Church. You're not a good Jew because you do not live by the Ten Commandments. You're not a good Muslim because the Quran is not in your heart, and etc. Without there being an implied or stated condemnation of man, why would anyone not only try to make any remedial effort, but why would they even entertain what appears to be the initial idea? This is one of the reasons that the real kind of mystical effort is not known publicly, and why only versions that are irrelevant, impotent, non-dangerous are known. And also synonymously with that, is the fact that they're not potent for an ordinary person's pursuit, and therefore they're acceptable, but they are rendered harmless enough that life can abide it. The public can tolerate it. And so how, besides the difficulty of the public hearing it, of ordinary people hearing it, what I was trying to get at, of course, is in a particular case, the difficulty in an individual hearing it within his own nervous system, with his own mind, which is what I was bringing up of late, that it's almost impossible to feel as though you're involved in some kind of real effort unless there are a series of criteria met, such as there being some way to distinguish yourself from those not participating in this great secret, gigantic, or whatever work that someone believes they're involved with, the great quest. There must be a stated aim, and the aim also has to point out. Again, you're always left with this. If it says, well, come join this, we are the seekers of the truth, we're the seekers of the mystical enlightenment, whatever it is, and people say, that's what I'm looking for, then to even say that, and they say, well, is that where you're taking us, or do you know where it is? And somebody says, yes. You already have it's in you, it's not them, it's not a conspiracy, and it's not dastardly deeds on their part. It is already in you, you understand, that you hear it announced, bus going to so-and-so, wherever it is. And you go, oh, are you actually going there? Do you know where it is? And the guy goes, yeah. Already, by your interest, you understand. You believe that you do not belong where you are. Don't blame it on some charismatic crackpot. Don't blame it on anybody, because nothing is to blame. But you do understand, to here, we're going to move ourselves, if not physically, we're going to move ourselves intellectually, spiritually. Internally, we're going to a new place. Mystical bus 704, leaving now. And you go, am I too late? Is it really going? Really, are you going? Yes, we're going to do our best. Or yes, I am going. And you can go with me. For you to even show interest, but to participate at all, to go, well, count me in until further notice. I'll see how it is. You understand, you have already placed a tacit condemnation on man. In other words, you believe, wherever you start from, that you believe, well, I don't belong here. I am not in my proper place. Because if you did not feel that way, why would you want to go somewhere else? We have the spectrum that is large enough to accommodate everybody. Those of you who recall, we proved it years ago mathematically, the world, this planet, planet Earth, is large enough, contrary to popular conventional wisdom, even scientific thinking. I don't know how they overlooked it, but you recall we proved it, and I'll let you people join in. You did some of the math, but we proved it, just like I promised, that this world is large enough at all times to accommodate everyone. Of course, the joke being, it doesn't take mathematics, it takes the ability to know. And have no comment, of course. But it takes the great mystical ability to look around and go, oh, But everyone believes, as they're supposed to, that they are in somewhat of a less than ideal position. That everyone believes that they in some way have fallen short. I'm trying to present you a different picture tonight of why that is. And why that is because the magical river that flows through everyone, due to life's requirements for you playing the ordinary role of man, requires that you continually dam and divert the flow. And life offers no parallel notation that this is how things must be. The reason being that there's so few people who get upset enough to actually try and be a mystic that life is efficient. It's just so few people that I know when it's you feel like you have a problem or a situation and it's yours, you're all this human enough, you feel like, hey, this is the problem. But especially under any sort of guise of it being mystical or spiritual, that's just one half step into the good old trap of, well, I've been chosen for a mission, or the gods have particularly smiled on me or selected me, which is even less than a half step from feeling like, well, I've been cursed. There are so few people actually involved at this at any given time is why life can tolerate it. And it's why life, if you lost your place there, or if I made you lose your place, it's why life makes no particular notation. Why, another way to look at it, if there is secret information or other kind of things that people believe are or have been involved or should be involved in some great secret mystical tradition, why they're so hard to find, why they seem to be hidden, why is everybody sitting on it? If somebody knows a secret, why don't they just come out and tell us? Trees tell you, mountains tell you, asphalt tells you, dandruff tells you, birds tell you. Oh yeah, I know all that, old allegorical stuff. I don't know the secret. I know you do, sir. But he doesn't want to know it bad enough to do anything about it, which is why life lets it go. But the problem, or the basis of feeling as though there's a problem is consciousness has to be continually downed and diverted. Would you care to explain that in more detail? I can explain it so abruptly and in such crude detail that I could do it and we just stop the tape for the night and I leave and everybody go, what? The river of consciousness, the flow of energy, from the feet up to a certain point, it keeps you alive. Keeps you physically alive. And according to your own genetics, it's of no importance and there's nothing particular you can do about it. But it's already determined because of the machinery of you physically, genetically, how long this energy is going to keep your machine running. So that's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about getting up to the level of consciousness, getting up to what is now the end, the operative end of everyone's nervous system, of yours individually. That is what makes you feel as though I am I. This is me. That consciousness is the only thing that makes you human. It is the only thing in a slightly skewed, a slight variation is the only thing that has you interested in such as this. The reason that people feel dissatisfied is because this flow is being constantly diverted, dammed up and diverted. I can easily describe it to you. But watch what happens as soon as I describe it. You want me to go ahead and give you my safe prediction? It's not the lotto number. But as soon as I describe what I mean by dammed up and diverted, and I pause to let it sink in, you will be immediately engaged in damning and diverting. Do you know what damning and diverting is known as? Thought. It is the continual interruption of the flow of consciousness. It has been attempted for thousands of years, pops up, and I've already covered many of them, and that the apparent method, the claimed, the professed method, the remembered methods have been everything, described as everything from being continually attentive, being continually mindful, always remembering something, remembering the name of God, remembering each breath, just remembering that you're here outside of what else is going on. What are they describing? And I have even joined in just a slight variation for the last few weeks. I have pointed out that, and no matter, all of those descriptions could be melted down and to say, well, it's the attempt to grab one's attention and to hold it, to control it. But if you're simply listening with a dammed up, diverted mind, I can now, after doing that, I can make it sound as though it's just the opposite. What is enlightenment? What is all of this that they have talked about? What is it that many of you have already had taste of? I've even described it as being consciousness freed from comment. But you could hear it to start with, either my descriptions or from Zen or Sufism or all kinds of minor cults and pieces of historical recollections in China and India, all over the world, of people apparently engaged in meditation, people engaged in, that's about as far as people can take it, that people sit and engage in some form of meditation. It could be called prayer, it could be called attempt to concentrate and focus the mind. But what are they attempting to do? And the descriptions go all the way from some of the classic ones, as I point out, being that people believe that they're engaged in either prayer or meditation to try and calm the mind, to calm this constant chatter and this jumping and the being pulled here and there through having one's attention completely out of control. All the way from that to the apparent description that the attempt is to stabilize something. And I've even thrown in my own that it's like the attempt to erect a lighthouse, standing at the shore, the waves beating, the winds blowing, and yet finally there's something in you that is not continually pushed and pulled. Can you, it's not, as always, makes this interesting, it should, there is no perfect opposite to that. But I would suggest that there is another way to look at it. That rather than it being a control of attention, it is a total lacking, not of any control, but the appearance, the illusion, the delusion, the mirage, which is what all damning and diverting is intellectually, is a mirage on the basis that it can be done away with. I guess engineers and those involved with the psychic sciences might not like my connotation and use of the word mirage, but moot, dispensable. You know what happens? Let's get crude. Every time you think, no matter who you are, no matter what you're thinking, every time you think, you have dammed up consciousness. You have actually stopped being as conscious as you could be. And I'm not talking now at a mystical level, just any human, any sane, genetically sound human is continually, I'm going to say it, it's not spatially correct, lowers their consciousness. Just so that you don't think that you got completely lost. But now I'd like to refer back to damning and diverting rather than lowering consciousness, because that always sounds as though that man is in some way a less than even acceptable state, which is always far too close to guilt and shame and feeling condemnation, which accomplishes nothing other than to keep you where you are. But rather than just call it lowering of consciousness, consider that consciousness my magic river. And rather than lower and raise, and that always sounds nice and qualitative, to be of higher consciousness, to be a better person, to be more spiritual or to be less spiritual, to be more civilized and decent or to be less. But rather than this kind of spatial movement, how about my damning and diverting? To here is the magic flow going through everyone. But because of the needs of ordinary life, you must continually divert it, or to dam it up, just momentarily, but it goes on continually. May I remind you again what it's commonly known as? Thought. All internal comment is a momentary damming and diverting of consciousness. It is necessary. I've been trying to hint, again tonight, pointing out that a man cannot even be aware of man's unique sense of state of awareness, that is, a cortical neural function, that you can't even be aware of it until you have a mind. And by the time you do, then the whole situation becomes kind of cloudy and uncertain, as witnessed by the fact that we have religion, psychology, words. obviously I made a mistake, including words with whole fields of religion and psychology. So, but I just don't have time to continue to correct myself, so you'll have to make of it what you will. Every time you think you have diverted and damned the flow of consciousness, humanity must do it collectively. Nothing would now be operating in the world of man. Man would in no wise be distinguishable from the higher apes. We would not be man, even if you had the potential, even if the energy was flowing through man and was reaching the level of the intellect. If all this could be true, if life had arranged it and it was flowing up here, and yet for some reason man did not begin to think, it wouldn't do you any good. That was the opening story I read tonight. That when life got through making everything else, it made man. And then as soon as he became conscious, if you remember the story, it said as soon as he became conscious. My version, my story is, if you were listening, that he didn't make him in that manner, that life didn't make him. But it says, after life created everything else, it made man, and as soon as the first one became conscious, with a wide sweep, in other words, life looked at man and went, hey, look around everything else, look what I've done. All that don't get hung up. I'm not saying using life, as you people know, is some sort of pseudonym for God. That life itself made everything else and made man, and then after the first one became conscious, of course life knew it, and as soon as it did, then life showed everything that wasn't that man. The man was conscious, now had a sense of I. And so life said, hey, look around you, because now you have a sense of awareness, you can appreciate yourself, and now you understand, or your sensation is, there's you, that is I, and then all this not I. And I did it all. And life said, all right, now that you're conscious, look at everything else I've done. Because at the moment he became conscious, everybody becomes, to use ordinary terminology, like a raving, flaming egomaniac. You're supposed to. Well, that's the whole joy to see a kid. It's normally ordinary people, they attribute it to the day of his first word. But the thing is, the kid became conscious, and it is just astounding. It's just delightful if you're there. And I know they say, well, he said his first word. But it's what they're really saying is life itself speaking through the mother or father, like he's becoming human. It's like the first spark. If he's your kid, of course you loved him and all that, but it's like the first day, people never forget it, if they're reasonably alert themselves, the first day that they know he's a human. Because what happened, he then became conscious. He then felt that he was separate from you. He was now a human. After life saw the first one become conscious, the first man, life said, hey, because now he could do it. Now he had to do it. That his consciousness, now this first human, then he realized, wait, I feel a sensation that I am separate from out here. Everyday life and me are two different things. And the only thing he's interested in at that moment is him. There's nothing wrong when I said a flaming egomaniac. You know that wasn't pejorative. The point was, it was suddenly, you have something that is of unique value. A hippo never goes through that. A lion never goes through that. No matter how big and strong they get, they can never have that experience. It is singular. And of course, as a kid, in a sense, it's lost because you don't remember it. You were just a year old or 2 years. But back to my story. Life takes the first man who becomes conscious, after he becomes conscious, and now that he has no choice, he suddenly feels the sensation that it's I and then everything out there. And so now that life has got him there, sees it there, life says, hey, now that you're here, and life showed him everything else in life, showed him everything else that was not him. And then life went, huh? I mean, it should be a delight, right? Huh? And the man stopped what he was doing, which is a key phrase, by the way, but the story says. And life, with a wide sweep of his arms, its arms went, huh? To get the guy, give him something. The first thing for the man to do, the first conscious man, the man stopped what he was doing, took a long look around at everything else, and spoke the first human words, which were, in response, maybe life went, huh? Huh? He said, I'll have to think about it. I assume that I'm theatrical enough. He's saying, well, I'll have to get back. Even though it may have started out sounding like a rhetorical, life is asking. Because it's not rhetorical. Life is constantly turning to your consciousness, every individual going, huh? What do you think all forms of aggression, intellectual, all forms of criticism, all opposition between people's beliefs, what do you think that amounts to? It's life continually to each person going, huh? Huh? That is, what do you think of everything that's not you? He's asking a Jew, huh? Huh? What do you think of this? And the Jew turns around, he sees a bunch of damn Muslims and Christians. And he thinks, well, I'm not so sure you'd made the right choice, or I'm not so sure I like this after all. You understand? That life is continually going, huh? Huh? And everybody, Christians, Italians, Greeks, Indians, if you're ordinary, it makes you continually stop and either damn, you're continually damning and diverting your own consciousness, and you're reacting to life going, huh? Huh? Because you're satisfied with you, so you're replaying it. As per my story, you are now conscious. You're the first conscious man. You can say you're not, but as far as you're concerned, you are. You're the only one you care about, right? Right. So you might as well be the first. Everybody else, even if somebody was, quote, conscious before you, they didn't get it right. And that's obvious. So, here you are replaying this, and not just in your lifetime. You're replaying it momentarily, but your whole lifetime redoes it. And life is doing the same thing. This story is continually going on. You do have it. I know I pared down some of my stories, but life made everything. Then it made man. And as soon as the first one, which you can look at as being you can look at as being you for your lifetime, you can look at as being you when you get a little bit better, momentarily, from second to second. But back to the story. He made the first man, and after the first one became conscious, remember what that entails. That the energy got high enough that he felt. He now had a mind that separated him from out there, as he should. Life made him do it. But as soon as that happened, life said, huh? Look out here at the rest of it. Now that you can distinguish between you and there. Because a fish can't distinguish between itself and water. A hippo can't distinguish between itself and the savannas of Africa or wherever it's living, you understand. But the fish and water sounds the easiest. A fish can't ever distinguish itself from water. Because literally, it cannot distinguish itself. If it did, it's suicidal. It cannot take its foot away from where the energy flows through it, which in this case, its immediate environment is water. Life now has got a man conscious, the first one. And life goes, now look around at the water. Look around at everything that's not you, now that you separate, now that you distinguish you from everything else. Look at this. Look. Huh? Huh? And the guy goes, he stops what he was doing. And he said, I'll have to think about it. That is what the damning and diverting of consciousness is. That is what all human thought is. It's why I so continuing, not just me, but in the past, you've heard it in different ways. But hammering on being critical, being aggressive. It is the normal state of man. It is not to make anybody feel bad, because your religions, your mothers, life can already do that to you. But to understand what it is. It is life continually going, huh? Huh? And according to who you are, you look around constantly, just from second to second. And you think you're responding. That life is actually going, huh? Huh? That life needs your help. That you look around and you say, well, being a good Albanian, I think you should do something about the Serbs over here. Or being a good Greek, I think you should do something about the Turks. I mean, they've been around far too long. They're not going to catch on. Or whatever it is. Or there are far too many rich people. If you're really asking me, huh, I'd say, why don't we redistribute the wealth a little? And of course, that keeps life going up here. It is a very little necessity for man to be in that kind of conflict physically. I know it still goes on. But that is not man's main job. Man is part of the physical food chain. He's going to eat and be eaten, but that requires no effort. It requires no more effort, no more intelligence than is required of a lion and a jackal to play their role in this kind of physical food chain, death and rebirth. But it's up here that man is singular. And it's up here that he feels this conflict as he should. And I know the conflict when it starts out, even to the best ordinary street-level minds and philosophers. They take the conflict to be ideological, theoretical, conflict between religious ideas, religious beliefs, political systems. It's no such thing. Well, it is, but that won't get you anywhere. What it is each person having to momentarily, continually divert and dam up consciousness and think. And once you understand that, to go past that and go, well, think about what? You're back into it. It doesn't matter at that level what you think about. It's life going, huh? Trying to remember my story. This is a good new creation story. All life said was, huh? I mean, it showed the man everything. Everything. Think about it. Everything else except that one guy. That is, except your consciousness, your mind. Showed you everything. I didn't give examples, but I will now. It showed him everything else but him. Everything else that it had done. That includes all religions, all politics, all history, all arts. It involves everything that is a part of the human intellect. It showed him everything else except him. And went, huh? It didn't say huh specifically. It didn't go, well, what do you think of this? It just showed him everything that wasn't him. That is his mind, because that's all we're talking about now. That's the only thing that man's the only creature that life can talk to like that. Life does not ask a hippo what it thinks. Because a hippo cannot distinguish itself from the environment. It's not supposed to. If you had no intellect, you would not feel distinguished from your environment. If you were still at the level that you were in the development of your nervous system, if you were still at the level that you were when you were 6 months old, you could not distinguish. You would just simply be, now, whatever you be, a 300-pound little... and you could not distinguish. So life cannot ask, you understand. I know this sounds allegorical some of it, but this is the physical reality of life. They cannot distinguish. And so life is not asking anyone but man. It cannot show a fish water. It cannot do it. A fish cannot see water. It cannot conceive of water. It cannot conceive of itself as separate from its life. Only man can do that. And as soon as man did it, life showed him. Said, look, everything else besides you, now that you can distinguish, now look out there. Of course, now I'm adding words because all life did was it showed him all with a wave of the arms and said, huh? And it didn't say, huh, what do you think about architecture over here? Huh, what do you think about the way Western civilization is growing here in Greece and some areas opposed to how it's springing up over here and what will later be known as China? It just went, huh? Because that's all it has to do. Now that your consciousness could talk, that is, now that man had a mind, you are continually responding to it. And each and every time you do, from the viewpoint of being, from the mystical viewpoint to make it simple, you are continually diverting potential consciousness. To use the terms and the descriptions that the ordinary have always enjoyed, it sounds better, but because it makes it sound as though there's a condemnable place where you are now that you should not be, that every time you think, in a sense, you have lowered your consciousness. To go back so that I want to make sure that you understand, I know that's the ordinary terms, and even I could use it about being expanding or raising your consciousness. But in a sense, every time you think, and don't say, and get past the idea of, well, you mean think proper thoughts or good thoughts, that's really childish. That's morality. And then you can say, well, wait a minute, you mean think either scientifically or technically correct or incorrect, which sounds a little bit better, but it's the same thing. Because every time you think, you have stopped the flow of consciousness, you have diverted it or stopped it. And to say, well, but it was an important thought. There's no way to discuss it, and I'm certainly not going to argue the point. I'm going to tell you this, that is not the state of enlightenment. That is not the Buddhahood. That is not the Tao. That is not understanding that that's the way of things. It is a seamless flow, is what it is. And once you understand it in that particular way, then you understand from every possible corner, and specifically in the areas that seem to be the history of mysticism and things transcendental, just several things that they go around and around, and people do not seem to make anything in particular about don't be hostile, no matter what it's called. Don't be angry. Don't be critical. Don't hate your fellow man. And they even carry it further. Don't even hate people who hate you. And as long as you're thinking, you divert, your mind stops in, consciousness stops, and you have to think about that. Like, is it possible, or does it mean that? And you're back at a simpler level, because we're back to morality. Don't hate your fellow man. And you think, well, and somebody says, because it says not to here in our Holy Scripture. Our tradition of our culture says don't hate your fellow man because it's not right. And you go, oh, okay. That doesn't tell you anything. Every time you think, I was going to say all the descriptions of awakening, illumination, the Buddhahood, or the Tao, an understanding that that's the way things go. See, an understanding, to use that term, translation through 2 or 3 generations of other translations, but it's a fair term, that the Tao would be the understanding, the awakening to understand the way things go. Do you understand what conflict, even verbally, superb conflict, that is with life going, huh? And what your mind does is go, well, I'll have to think about that. That was my original story. But you're constantly going, yeah, but not this. When life goes, huh? Do you understand that if we described a state of expanded consciousness, or the state of awakening or illumination, as being an understanding of the way things go? It's not fatalism, because fatalism is a word. Fatalism is stopping consciousness and going, An understanding of the way things go. That is a ceaseless flow of consciousness. It is having no comment. And it can't be faked. But the dastardly thing is, it can be done. And as far as there being a great distinction between a mystic and a common man, I put it to you tonight in one of the news items, the difference between the so-called states of being asleep and being awake is simply that in one of the states you're aware of it. When you're damming up and diverting consciousness, when you're stopping it, when you're interfering with the seamless flow, you're not aware of it because you're thinking. Your mind is still active, and if you're at that level, it is, of course, if you're sane, just ordinary, you consider it to be of some importance. Because life is going, huh? And so you have to constantly stop and think, well, okay, well, no. And it seems to be of some importance. But notice, all over the world, even at simple levels like religion, but even specifically in the traces that seem to be mystical activities and etc., a total rejection of all sorts of hostility. I mean, they don't even, the closer you get to any real recollection of something that went on of an extraordinary nature, the less they're involved, as poor as the history is, but the less they're involved with giving reasons, of justifications, of explaining, well, don't be hostile because it's bad for civilization or the gods don't want you to. They just say don't. And some of them even go worse, and they just say, if you don't get hostile with people, you're an idiot. They just seem to turn it back on you. They don't, only the terminally dense would ever get mad at anybody, or get angry or critical. And any reasonable person will go, that can't be true. That's some kind of parable or something. Because you've got to be mad at stupid people. Well, you've got to be mad at intolerant people. You've got to condemn that. I mean, they're just things to do in life. That's right. Life's going, huh? Huh? And you go, well, I'll have to think about it. So there is that kind of rejection, just rejection of hostility. And very common, very common. And it doesn't seem to be quite as specific even to ordinary minds, what it means or what to do with it, but a kind of rejection, I'll slip up on you, of excessive talk. Now let's skip that. A kind of rejection almost of talk, which shows up with the common attempted physical rituals and pursuits of things mystical by retiring oneself from life, removing oneself from life, and undertaking vows of silence. I guess you could do worse, if that's all you could do. But have you ever thought, what does that represent? What is it at a cruder level that they believe they're doing? What is motivating it? They are trying to quit talking. Well, yeah, we just said that. They go and if they join this monastery, they have to swear they won't talk. But I want to know why they do it. Okay, I answered you, but I'll answer it again. They're trying to quit talking. No, I don't think you heard me. I understand that people go and they actually try to quit talking. I even tried that. I went to a workshop and we sit around and we went all Saturday, most of a Sunday, and we didn't talk. It was really, but I don't know, that's got to be just some sort of external attempt at something internally real. That's why I was asking you. Yeah, I heard you. I'll answer you a third time. They're trying to quit talking. All of it is about one thing: a seamless flow of consciousness. I'm not even asking for an answer. I'm asking for you to. Let me just reread one or two that I didn't, but from one bouncy view. The only difference between being asleep and being awake is that in one state you're aware of it. If you're talking, you're not aware of it. And I bet many people go, yeah. If you're thinking, you can't be aware of it. That may sound hard, if not insane, even to you people who've been around, but I'm sorry. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to give you a new boost. The difference between being awake and being asleep, the difference in being in your ordinary state, no matter what it is or where you started, and being enlightened, being illuminated. The difference is, in one of the states you know it. The state where you don't know it is when you're thinking about it. So that was a simple version. The state where you're not is when you're thinking. And all the children wait to hear again about it. No. That was the simple version. When you're thinking. Consciousness, freed from comment, lies in the world of seamless thought, and seamless thought in the world of consciousness without comment. There's the ones out of order.